This video is about cutting the hole in the hood to allow air to pass through the filter, whatever you're using to mount the filter to, in this case a jar, from the outside to the inside. I wish I had a melon to simulate my melon. Melon is a large fruit, but sometimes it's also used as slang for head. In this case, I'm using a blanket, and the purpose for this is I want to get some idea of how my head will be sitting inside of this hood. And it's not that comfortable to have your head inside this hood before the fan is set up. And if you're making a larger like this hood, I can still breathe as long as this isn't tucked into a shirt, because my nose and mouth aren't that far from the opening. But if you're using a trash bag as the basis for your hood, then it definitely wouldn't be safe to put your head in it unless you had a hose to deliver air while you were doing the fitting. But that would involve another setup. Actually, I have something like that set up, and I will show that just for a sec. So this is what I have set up for a hose. I was initially actually thinking of making this for like putting this in a backpack and using this for as the source, both the filter and the source of air. But the fan doesn't do that good with differences in pressure, so I wasn't able to get the airflow for the amount of power that I was looking for. The design that I'm putting together now is a lot more efficient. And this string right here, I can just put this around my shoulder, and then I have a supply of air that's just being blown into the hood. So if I'm fitting a trash bag over my head, I can still breathe from the air being blown in by this. Back to the other design. If you don't have something like that, then you can just find something to use to act as a model for your head, just so that you have an idea of how the parts will fit when your head is in there, which tells me that this is where I want to cut for the motor. Before I do that, I'll make sure the motor is still mounted to the hat. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just trace around here, and then I'll be able to cut out that shape. Now, I recommend, instead of just cutting out a circle, to essentially cut out kind of like triangles. And the reason for doing this is I'll have more of a basis for attaching. So I can this can kind of help me attach this hood to the cap that will hold it in place. And also it will make it a little bit easier if I want to, say, make this hole a little bit larger. I can just continue cutting along those. So I'm not going to cut here, I'm just going to cut there. I think that the material should stretch a little bit, so that's why I'm not cutting. My plan is to not cut quite to the edges. And it will probably come, once it's cut, these seams could come apart. You could restitch around the seams, I'm going to use duct tape. I'm just going to cut there, cut there, cut there. And might as well cut right on this video. There's about a centimeter between this cap and the hood, so I should be able, if I'm careful, to get a cut started here without doing any damage to the internal parts. Now that I got it started. All right. Sometimes it's easier to cut with scissors, sometimes it's easier to cut with a razor blade. And now my idea is that these flaps that I didn't completely cut away can be used. I can kind of stretch this over. At this point, I think I'm going to remove what I was using to prop up Jack as my head. I'm going to remove that so that I can just be easier to work around here. And move the angle of this camera up a bit. And see now I work a little bit more easily. So what I'm trying to do here is pull that cap, the bottle cap, through this hat. Move this camera back a bit. I might need to give it a little bit more room. Yeah, it looks like the hole is a bit too small. So here I'm going to demonstrate both advantages to this way of cutting it. Is I can just cut a line along these lines a little bit more to make that hole wider. I could still, if I had cut around here, I could do it, but it would be a lot more cutting. So this is a little bit easier. And then the second advantage of this is that it will let me, I can actually use those flaps to attach it to the jar lid. Guess I've been calling it cap, The lid is effectively a very large cap. The word used would more commonly be lid. So I want to attach this to this lid, and now it looks like it's just large enough. And I'll probably glue around this when I'm all done with it. But right now I'm just going to use a rubber band. And I'll have more of an idea of if this is fitting. And then I'll be able to just attach the filter and run power through it. And at that point get an idea of how well it's working. Right now I'm going to get a rubber band. Okay, so I have a rubber band, and I'll just, and right now those flaps are holding this hood onto this fan. And now I should be able to attach the filter and then hook up the power supply. And while it's a mistake that this comes off to the side, I had initially meant to have this line up here, but I had panicked because the epoxy was drying out, and so it's now over there, but I can work with that. So this video was showing how to make a hole in your hood to attach the positive pressure filtering device, in this case a filter attached to a fan, using a jar as a mechanism for attaching the filter to the fan.